Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Rocco, Cabaretti, Caterer. So Rocco is a Naya commander, X and red, green, and white. He's a 3/1 and he says when he enters the battlefield, if you cast him, you may search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less and put it onto the battlefield. So we have a creature tutor from the command zone. So obviously this leads to a bunch of combos, which we'll get to at the end. We've got a little bit of card draw in Archivist of Ogma, Esper Sentinel, and Sylvan Library. Then we've got all of our combos here. We'll get to that later. Bunch of fast mana. We do want Rocco to come out as quickly as possible and have the maximum amount of mana pumped into X as possible, along with, of course, our red blasts. A fairly typical Naya mana base with Gaia's Cradle, of course. We've got our protection spells to make sure that Rocco doesn't get countered. So we've got Deflecting Swat, Destiny Spinner to make him uncounterable, Grand Abolisher, Ranger Captain of Eos, Silence, Veil of Summer, and Vexing Shusher. It can't be countered, and you can pay either red or green to make target spell uncounterable. We could also maybe play Allosaurus Shepherd or some other cards, but you know, this is what we're going with here. We've also got Calamity's Wake, which is a silence that has a Rest in Peace staple to it, essentially. Then we've got a bunch of mana acceleration, including Priest of Titania and Bloom Tender and Professional Facebreaker, to make sure that Rocco comes out not only faster, but X's more. We've got a bunch of removal spells, including creatures that we can tutor up with Rocco. So we've got Abrade, Swords to Plowshares, and Force of Vigor and Nature's Claim. But then we've also got Manglehorn, Cathar Commando, and Skyclave Apparition. Manglehorn is important for the ability that says artifacts your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. So if our opponents are doing anything artifact shenanigans wise, such as Dockside Extortionist, it at least makes sure that they can't combo on the same turn or use the mana immediately. But just any of these cards are just tutor targets in case we need to find removal. Then we've got, of course, a bunch of Stax cards that we can Rocco for. So we've got all of our Stony Silences here in Collector Oof and Nullrod. We've got Archon of Emeria and Aethersworn Canonist and Phyrexian Censor as our Rule of Law effects, along with Deafening Silence. We've got Aven Mind Sensor to stop searching, Thalia to tax non-creature spells, Drannith Magistrate because of course white, and Elesh Norn to double our triggers and prevent our opponent's triggers. And then a bunch of tutors, mostly for creatures, but not all, including some of the more expensive tutors like Recruiter of the Guard, Imperial Recruiter, and then we've got Vivian on the hunt for reasons we'll explain later. And then lastly, some unsorted cards like Endurance and Noctis Revival that don't cleanly fit into any specific category. So next is, of course, a discussion on all of our combo pieces. So obviously we've got the Kiki-Jiki combo in here. We can use Kiki-Jiki in combination with Felidar Guardian to make infinite Kiki-Jikis. We can also use Temur Sabertooth in combination with Dockside Extortionist. If we have a Dockside and our opponents have collectively 5 total artifacts and or enchantments among them, we generate 5 treasures per Dockside. We can then cast the Dockside, bounce it back with Temur Sabertooth, and repeat for infinite treasures. And then we've got Food Chain combos. So Food Chain exiles a creature and generates mana equal to that creature +1, which can only be spent on creatures. So we can combine that with Squee the Immortal, which can be cast from exile. So if we have Food Chain and Squee, we make infinite creature mana, and then we can use that infinite creature mana to cast Rocco, go find whatever we want. We can then Food Chain the Rocco back into our command zone, cast Rocco again, tutor whatever we want, etc. We can tutor out whatever combo pieces we need in our deck and win the game that way. Vivian on the Hunt is a Birthing Pod that's going to combine with some of our cards. So if we have Birthing Pod or Vivian on the Hunt, and we've got Felidar Guardian or any creature that costs 3. So let's say we have a creature that costs 3, right? We sack it, we go grab Felidar Guardian, it blinks Vivian on the Hunt or Birthing Pod, but Vivian is better because we don't have to keep paying to use its ability. We then activate the Vivian, which kills Felidar Guardian. It goes and finds Karmic Guide. The Karmic Guide reanimates the Felidar Guardian. The Felidar Guardian blinks the Vivian comes back. The Vivian then sacks the Felidar Guardian and goes and grabs Kiki-Jiki. Kiki-Jiki copies Karmic Guide, which brings back the Felidar Guardian, which blinks the Kiki-Jiki, and then we go off that way. Now, Wirewood Symbiote here can be used in combination with certain cards. So we also, of course, have, as we mentioned earlier, Priest of Titania. So if we have a sufficient number of elves, let's say, we can tap the Priest of Titania for a certain amount of green mana. We can then use the Wirewood Symbiote or Temur Sabertooth to bounce one of the elves back to our hand, untapping the Priest of Titania and tapping for more mana. We can then replay the elf, bounce it again with Temur Sabertooth, and make infinite green mana that way. Or with Wirewood Symbiote, we can potentially get Wirewood Symbiote back. If we need to use Temur Sabertooth to bounce the Wirewood symbiote, we can do that as well. So also, the other notable thing is that Rocco is himself an elf, which means you can bounce Rocco back to your hand with Wirewood symbiote, and then cast Rocco again to go off again. So it's another way of basically having another bounce effect for Rocco. Same thing with Temur Sabertooth. You can bounce Rocco to replay him and go off that way. So the end state is usually is just going to be grabbing Kiki Jiki and Felidar Guardian to eventually do that combo. There really isn't another combo that you can do. All other combos, be they infinite mana or tutoring your deck or whatever, all lead to Kiki Jiki plus Felidar Guardian. So it is pretty important that this combo remain consistent, but there are potentially other things you can do. For example, you could make infinite mana and then use Temur Sabertooth to bounce Felidar Guardian back to your hand and replay it and blink Vivian on the hunt, and then just make infinite Rhino Warriors with Vivian's third ability. That would be a way to do it. So then you would get infinite tokens that way. Some other notable things are that Ranger Captain can tutor for Wirewood symbiote, so it is potentially capable of tutoring you into your combo. You can also use some of these removal spells in combination with your infinite bounce. So let's say you have Temur Sabertooth and infinite mana, you can bounce Skyclave Apparition back to your hand and replay it to exile all of your opponent's non-land permanents that cost 4 or less. Same deal with Manglehorn. You can bounce and replay it to destroy all of the opposing artifacts. Elishnorn will also combine with certain other cards in the deck, like Skyclave, like Ranger Captain to tutor multiple creatures, and so on. So the thing that you're going to do with Rocco for the most part is, game plan number 1 is try to assemble a combo and win the game. Be it Food Chain, be it Kiki Jiki, be it Temur Sabertooth, whatever. Now, if that's not viable, or if maybe an opponent is potentially going to go off before you can also use Rocco to just go tutor up Stax pieces and shut down the opponent that way. So again, multiple ways of getting there, but it's basically a deck where you can pivot into whatever you need because of the tutoring effect of Rocco from the command zone. So you can go grab combos, you can go grab value pieces, you can go grab Stax pieces as needed. And that is basically going to make up the Rocco Cabaretti Caterer deck.